What would you do if a workplace injury cost you your leg, and your employer not only refused to cover your medical bills but also denied you the chance to return to work, claiming there were no positions for someone with a disability? Join us as we follow Mariam's gripping journey through adversity and resilience, and discover how her story unfolds against all odds. The factory whistle pierced the early morning air, signaling the start of another workday. Mariam pushed through the heavy metal doors, her heart racing with the same determination that had become her trademark over the past 5 years. "Here we go again," she muttered to herself, tying her dark hair back into a tight bun. She greeted her colleagues with a warm smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Morning, Mariam," called out Tom, a burly man with a friendly grin. "Morning, Tom." "Ready to work," she replied, her voice bright. The rhythmic clank of machines and the occasional hiss of steam filled the large room, a symphony of industrial productivity that she had grown to love. Mariam was known for her efficiency and speed on the assembly line. Her nimble fingers danced over the conveyor belt, assembling parts with precision. "Hey, Mariam, how do you do it?" asked Lisa, an older worker who often marveled at her speed. "It's all about practice, Lisa. Just keep your eyes on the prize," Mariam said, winking. Despite her youth, she had earned the respect of the more seasoned workers. The only shadow on her horizon was the occasional side-eye from the foreman, Mr. Jenkins, who often questioned her place in the male-dominated space. "Why is she even here?" he would grumble to his assistant. But Mariam had proven herself time and again, and the whispers of doubt had slowly faded. One fateful afternoon, as Mariam was guiding a heavy crate into place, the floor vibrated under her feet. "What's going on?" she shouted over the noise, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of a forklift. "Mariam, watch out," someone yelled, but it was too late. A blur of movement, a screech of tires, and a sickening crunch echoed through the factory. The intoxicated driver had lost control, and Mariam was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The crushing weight of the forklift pinned her to the ground, and the world went silent. When Mariam awoke in the hospital, the pain was a living thing, pulsing through her body like a relentless tide. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, trying to focus on the figure standing beside her bed. "You're going to lose your leg," the doctor said, his voice distant and muffled, as if coming from underwater. Mariam stared at the ceiling, her heart racing. "What do you mean, lose my leg?" she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The doctor's expression softened. "I'm sorry, but the damage is extensive. We've done everything we can, but—" "No, please. You have to try harder." Mariam interrupted, her voice trembling with desperation. "I can't live without my leg. I won't survive this." Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. "Mariam, I understand how difficult this is," he said gently, leaning closer. "But the injury is severe. We need to act to save your life. Please, there must be something you can do," she pleaded, her voice rising. "I'm not ready to give up. I can't imagine my life without my leg. How am I going to live? What will I do?" The doctor sighed, his eyes filled with compassion. "I know this is hard to accept, but we have to think about your future. If we don't take this step, the consequences could be much worse." Mariam shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. "No, I can't accept that. You have to find a way. I can't be like this." "Mariam, I promise you, we will do everything we can to help you through this," he said, his voice steady. "But right now, we need to focus on what's best for your health." As the weight of his words sank in, Mariam felt her heart shatter, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. The company offered a small fraction of the medical bill, and the coldness in their eyes spoke louder than their hollow apologies. "We're sorry for your loss, but this is all we can do," a representative said, avoiding her gaze. As the hospital bills mounted, her world grew smaller with each passing day, trapped in a cycle of pain, despair, and financial ruin. The company had taken care of her surgery bills, but when it came to the medical expenses that accumulated during her months of treatment, their offer was nothing but a slap in the face. They covered only a small fraction of what was owed. She had fought for months to get any help, personally calling the HR office countless times, only to be met with the same response: no financial aid, no assistance. She had hoped for something more, anything more, but now, sitting across from the representative, she realized it had all been in vain. That feeling of being invisible, insignificant, settled over her like a dark cloud. Months of pain and uncertainty had led to this, a mere fraction of what she truly needed. As the hospital bills continued to pile up, the world around her seemed to shrink, trapping her in a never-ending cycle of physical and financial ruin. When she was finally released from the hospital, the reality of her situation hit her all at once. She had spent months recovering, unable to take care of her bills, and now there was no escaping the mess she had left behind. The hospital had offered her a wheelchair to help with her mobility, and she had gratefully accepted, but even that small gesture felt like a reminder of just how far she had fallen. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. A volunteer from the hospital had driven her back to her apartment, and as the car came to a stop in front of her building, she took a deep breath, preparing herself. The second her wheels hit the sidewalk, the weight of everything she had ignored for months came crashing down. She hadn't been able to pay rent in ages, and now, as she faced the landlord, it all came to a head. Mariam barely made it to her front door when Mr. Davis, her landlord, appeared out of nowhere. His stern face was even more unforgiving than usual. "Mariam," he barked, crossing his arms, "you need to pay your rent. Now." Her heart raced. The world felt like it was closing in. "I know, Mr. Davis," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm trying. I just need a little more time. Please, just a little more." Mariam barely managed to open the door when Mr. Davis appeared, his cold gaze already waiting for her. He crossed his arms over his chest, his stance rigid. There was no warmth in his voice, only impatience as he glanced at her. "Mariam," he began, a smirk creeping across his face, "you need to pay your rent. I don't think I've seen a check from you in months." Mariam's heart sank, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. "I know, Mr. Davis. I've been in the hospital. I'm trying." "Trying?" He interrupted, a laugh tinged with bitterness. "You weren't able to pay your rent while you had two legs, so how in the world do you expect to pay it with only one leg now? Who in their right mind is going to offer you a job while you're sitting in a wheelchair?" He raised an eyebrow as he spoke, his sarcasm dripping with disdain. Mariam swallowed hard, her throat tight with frustration and helplessness. "Do you think I asked to be in this position?" she said, her voice trembling as she took a step forward, trying to stand her ground despite the overwhelming pain she felt. "I didn't choose this. I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough." Mr. Davis's face hardened further. He pulled an eviction notice from his jacket and slapped it onto her door with such force that the sound reverberated down the hallway. "Time's up," he snapped, his voice final, cutting through the air like a knife. "I've given you enough chances. You're out. Pack your things." Mariam's chest tightened as she looked at the bright yellow paper, the bold black letters mocking her, each word a reminder of her failure. She felt the ground beneath her blur, the reality of her situation crushing her. Her voice came out hoarse and barely audible, "Mr. Davis, please. Just a little more time. I promise, I'll get the money to you. I swear." He didn't even flinch. His eyes narrowed, piercing her with their cold indifference. "You've had plenty of time, Mariam. You're done here." He turned on his heel, not waiting for her response, and walked away without a second glance. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. Mariam stood there, frozen, staring at the eviction notice on her door. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, but she couldn't bring herself to take it off. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Her legs. Her job. Her life. Every word Mr. Davis had said echoed in her mind, and she felt the weight of it all. One more thing slipping out of her control. Mariam wheeled herself to the company building, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been through so much in the past few months, her body broken, her finances destroyed, her life upended, but she refused to give up. She was determined to try again. Maybe, just maybe, her old job would take her back. She wasn't ready to give up the one thing she thought she had left. When she reached the HR department, she was greeted with a polite, but distant, reception. She asked to speak with someone about returning to work, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. A clerk behind the counter glanced at her briefly, then quickly ushered her to a small office where another HR representative waited. The man behind the desk was younger, with a slightly disheveled look, but still dressed sharply in his suit. "Hi, I'm Mariam," she began, forcing a smile. "I used to work here. I was hoping we could talk about me coming back. I've been through a lot recently, but I'm ready to return to work. If there's any position available?" The representative didn't let her finish. He raised a hand, cutting her off. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his tone polite but firm. "There are no available positions for someone with a disability. You'll have to look elsewhere for employment." Mariam's breath caught in her throat, the words striking her like a punch. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What? No, you're kidding, right? You can't just..." "No, I was injured on the job. I'm sorry, ma'am," he repeated, his voice colder now. "But we don't have any positions for someone in your condition. I understand this is difficult, but you'll have to seek employment elsewhere." Mariam's hands gripped the wheels of her chair, her knuckles turning white. She was in shock, unable to process what he was saying. "But I was hurt here. Right here, in the workplace. I didn't do anything wrong. This is where it happened, and now you're telling me you can't offer me a job?" She could barely keep the tremble out of her voice as she spoke. "I don't understand. How can you just turn me away like this?" The representative's face hardened. He adjusted his glasses and sighed, as if he was tired of the conversation. "You were careless, Mariam. You were supposed to watch where you were going, but you didn't. That's why you're in the position you're in now." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest like he was delivering the final word. "We can't have someone like you working here, it's just not practical." Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. Mariam's eyes widened in disbelief. "Careless," she repeated, her voice rising. "Careless? How do you blame me for getting hit by a forklift? Do you really think I wanted this to happen?" The HR representative didn't flinch. He merely shrugged. "If you had been paying attention, it wouldn't have happened. You're responsible for your own actions. It's not our fault." Mariam's vision blurred with anger and frustration, her heart hammering in her chest. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words got stuck in her throat. She had spent months fighting for her life, and now, just when she needed help, they were treating her like she was disposable. She glanced down at her wheelchair, the weight of her situation suddenly feeling unbearable. She forced herself to stand up straighter, trying to gather the strength to face him one last time. "You think I chose this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You think I chose to lose my leg and my job? How could you be so heartless?" The HR representative didn't respond. He simply shuffled some papers on his desk and looked away, as if he had already made up his mind. Mariam took one last look at the man who was supposed to help her, but instead, had shattered whatever hope she had left. She turned and wheeled herself out of the office, feeling as though the weight of the world was now on her shoulders. The weight of her new reality was too much to bear, and she collapsed in the hallway, sobs racking her body. "What am I going to do?" she cried, feeling utterly lost. With nowhere to go, she was forced to face the harsh truth: she was now homeless. Her days were a blur of pain and humiliation. "Do you have any spare change?" she would ask passers-by, often going to bed hungry, and found shelter in the most unlikely of places, under bridges and in alleyways. "Please, just a little help," she would whisper to the rain, her constant companion, a cruel reminder of the life she had lost. Each day brought new challenges, but she clung to the hope that things would get better. One stormy afternoon, the rain pounded against Mariam's frail form, soaking her to the bone as she huddled beneath the thin shelter she had created from what little she had left. The storm seemed relentless, mirroring the hopelessness she felt. Just as she began to lose all sense of time, a figure appeared through the mist, moving toward her. "Excuse me, ma'am," a voice called out, cutting through the roar of the rain. Mariam looked up, squinting against the downpour, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Mr. Thompson, a renowned lawyer she had once seen at community events. He stood before her, an umbrella in one hand, concern etched across his face. "Mr. Thompson," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper, too stunned to fully comprehend the situation. She blinked, as if to make sure he was really standing there. "What are you? How did you?" Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. "I saw you struggling out here in the rain," he interrupted gently, his eyes scanning her disheveled form. "Here, take this." He handed her a warm cup of coffee, steam rising from the lid. "You shouldn't be out here like this. Let's get you somewhere safe." Mariam's hands shook as she took the cup, the warmth of it a sharp contrast to the chill of the rain. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling, not just from the cold but from the overwhelming sense of gratitude. "I didn't think anyone would care. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Mr. Thompson said, his tone firm but kind. "Let's just get you out of this weather." He helped her carefully into his car, his actions steady and reassuring. As they drove, Mariam found herself silently wondering if she could trust the kindness of a stranger, but his quiet confidence made her feel a little less alone. When they reached his office, he offered her a comfortable chair, the space warm and inviting compared to the storm outside. As they settled in, Mariam felt the weight of everything she had been carrying settle in her chest. The tears she had been holding back for so long finally began to fall as she spoke. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was injured at work, Mr. Thompson. And the hospital bills, they're piling up. I tried to get help from my old job, but they just don't care. They even told me they have no positions for a disabled person like me." Her voice cracked as she finished, the injustice of it all too much to bear. Mr. Thompson's face hardened as he listened, his eyes burning with a new intensity. His jaw clenched, and he leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Mariam," he said, his voice low but full of determination, "I'll take your case. We'll fight for the justice you deserve." Mariam blinked in surprise, her heart racing. "Really? You'll help me?" Her voice faltered, the hope that had been buried deep inside her for so long flickering back to life. "Absolutely," he said, his voice steady and strong. "You're not alone in this anymore. I won't let them get away with what they've done to you." He stood, offering her his hand, his resolve unshakable. "We're in this together now." Tears welled up in Mariam's eyes again, but this time, they were tears of relief. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that there might be a way out of this nightmare. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Thank you so much." The legal battle was a long and arduous one. Court dates stretched into months, and the stress of it all began to show on Mariam's face. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she confessed one day, her hands shaking. "Just hang in there, Mariam. We're getting closer," Mr. Thompson encouraged, his voice steady. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. The day of the verdict finally arrived, and Mariam sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding like the hammer of fate itself. The judge's gavel echoed through the room, and the tension was palpable. "Will the court please rise?" the bailiff called, and Mariam held her breath. As the verdict was read, she could hardly believe it, the company was found liable for her injuries and ordered to pay her a significant sum of money. Yes, she shouted, tears streaming down her face. The look on the factory owner's face as he was held accountable was worth more to Mariam than any amount of money. You thought you could just push me aside, she said, her voice steady, but I'm still here. As she left the courthouse with Mr. Thompson, the storm outside had passed, and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm glow on her face. Look at that, Mr. Thompson said, smiling. A new beginning. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, I can finally breathe, Mariam replied, allowing herself to smile. Her journey had been one of pain and loss, but it had also been one of resilience and triumph. The world had tried to break her, but she had emerged stronger, her spirit unshaken. The story of Mariam's struggle resonated with the community, and her case became a rallying cry for disability rights. She's not just a victim, one activist said at a rally. She's a warrior. Her story served as a stark reminder of the prejudices that still existed in the world, inspiring a movement that demanded change. And so, as Mariam wheeled herself into a new apartment, paid for by her hard-fought settlement, she knew that she had not just secured her own future but had also paved the way for a more equitable tomorrow. I did it, she whispered to herself, a smile breaking across her face. Her journey had been about more than just survival, it had been about reclaiming her dignity and proving that she, and others like her, were not to be underestimated or forgotten. The factory may have taken my leg, she said, looking out at the horizon, but it will never take my spirit. And in the end, she had the last laugh. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to help our channel grow.